Okay. All right. It's Alexander Lawrence, the Portable Infinite. And today we got a special guest, Daniel Rachel. We haven't done much. I've done over 30 interviews in the past 2 years. We haven't done much ska, reggae, any at all. Like very maybe mentioned the specials like once or twice. But so it's really great that we got this new book. The book's called Too Much, Too Young, the two-tone record story. I just finished reading it this week. It took me like 2 days.
Huh.
And I tell the same story because I was born in 64. So like in 79, it was when I kind of really got into music and stuff. And so like at that time, really punk had kind of like wavered a little bit. Like a lot of the bands didn't really deliver in a way, maybe Susie and the Banshees had a few hits or something. But and then there was like this whole other kind of thing that happened. There was like rockabilly, ska, reggae, disco. There was just like, I was there when the movie Quadrophenia came out. I went to go see it on the day it came out, like in late 79. So that was like the same time as the specials, and they were all on the top of the pops in late 79. It was like the same exact same time. I probably found out about them in 80, maybe a little late. Because I think for Americans, I think we all kind of discovered them when they were on Saturday Night Live. I think is that when did you first get into the specials? And
Well, probably just a few months before. I mean, I was aware of them. Went from Top of the Pops, which was, a ritual for any young kid growing up into music here. It was
yeah,
the once a week TV program, and I would have seen Specials Madness Selector on that. But my first memory really is Too Much Too Young, which is beginning of January, just as they're about to come out to the US. But I'm aware of how much of an impact that Saturday Night Live performance had. I mean, some people talk about it as if it's the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, in
yeah,
terms of its a quaking impact.
yeah. It was a big deal. I mean, let me just say, okay, so this book, the full title is "Rude Boys, Racism, and Soundtrack of a Generation." Book by Daniel Rachel, introduction by Pauline Black. I've seen the selector. I've come over a bunch of times, and that sometimes when they play here in Southern California, they mention how Southern California was very welcoming to when I mean you didn't really go into the American tours with Madness and Specials and Selector, but like a lot of people here that didn't really get into punk or when punk got hardcore, you know a bunch of people like in this area of Southern California definitely were kind of into the mod thing, and they got the Vespa scooter, and they weren't really and then punk got really hardcore, got into oi, got the Sham Army kind of came along, but people weren't into that, but they were into the ska thing. They were the either being fans of the Who or Quadrophenia or the Jam, like they're really embracing here, and a lot of these bands. And I remember with the specials, the first time they played LA, they painted the checkerboard on the Whiskey a Go Go because they did like a 4-day thing there, and
Yeah.
it stayed up there for like 2 years and stuff. And I just thought that there was always a checkerboard. And somebody explained to me, oh yeah, the specials when they played there, they painted it specially for them. And
I think Horace Panther thought it was fantastic, and Jerry and Terry thought it was terrible. I thought it was a gimmick.
yeah, it'd be like some band like today, like whoever, like some band like Wet Leg, and they painted a mural on the Brixton Academy, and it just stayed up there for is like, why is it still up here? That's what it was up there for a couple of years, I remember, in the early 80s
Yeah.
and stuff. And so the Southern California, I mean, had like there was like this big influence of ska things, even though uh it wasn't really widely accepted. I mean, these bands were on MTV, like because they all had done video. Can you like comment on that a little bit? I don't know if it's so much in the book, but because like American bands in the early days weren't really into doing videos, but the Brits were all doing music videos really early on, and especially Madness, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, but videos were really important for Madness for sure. And Dave Robinson, who ran Stiff Records, would direct them and just come up with just any old random idea on a piece of paper and then just decide to go off and film it. But I think Two Tone just kind of missed the MTV thing, really, didn't it? I mean, what's
Yeah.
MTV? Is it 80, 81, 82? And by that time, the first thrust of Two Tone is over in the UK anyway. So
Yeah.
and the selector, barely made videos and specials. I mean, Ghost Town's a great video, isn't it? And then there's, I
Yeah.
mean, here they did a video for Too Much Too Young, which combined some studio stuff and a live concert. But when that was shown here, the BBC refused to show the third verse. My speaker's buzzing. That's me. Hang on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was wondering. That was a weird sound.
It's a dodgy connection. That's how high tech I am here in North London. Sorry about that. Yeah. So I mean, videos isn't a great part of the Two Tone story in many ways. It's a shame, I guess. And even now, I mean, a curious one, is the video for Nelson Mandela, because when you watch that what the filmmakers were trying to do was recreate a township in South Africa, but what you see is kind of black kids and breakdancing and doing what the new fad is for that year, 84. But apart from a poster, there's nothing really that tells you about what that song is lyrically. Whereas on the sleeve of that record, you've got all that information about who Nelson Mandela was and who the African National Congress were. I mean, for me, and I suspect most of my generation, none of us knew any of that until we got the record, but the video took you somewhere else.
Well, I think yeah, it was more an after effect because I mean, after Ghost Town, I mean, the specials were kind of done in a way, and so some of those bands had broken up. But as an after effect, when MTV needed videos, British bands had Soft Cell had a whole album full of videos or something, or Gary Newman or some of those bands at that
Yeah,
time.
I mean, Chrysalis actually funded videos for all of In the Studio. I think bar about one of the songs or two, perhaps. But the budgets for them were like 10,000, 15,000 pounds, whereas by the equivalent would be the Duran Duran getting 100,000 or Spandau Ballet 150,000. So it's so low budget. It just wasn't I don't think where Jerry Dammers' head was at, really, to be doing that kind of thing.
But yeah, I mean, you look on YouTube and all these Madness and specials videos. I mean, they have like 300 million views. I mean, it's like amazing. Like the real interest in these bands are, it's still real strong. And there's bands like No Doubt and bands that kind of
Yeah.
do this kind of music and stuff. But so I
You
mean,
know what? You remind you when I say that about Jerry and videos. I forgot. He actually wrote the storyboard for What I Like Most About You As Your Girlfriend, which I forgot is in the book. The original storyboard, and it's not far off what the finished product was. And Jerry's dressed up as this spaceman with a green suit, and that's a very funny video and a great song too.
What's great about the Two Tone also is the movie Dance Craze. I mean, they really got the live. I mean, and that movie, I mean, it's not your standard. It's like you're like a member of the band, like how they shot it from the stage. It's like you're like Neville Staples jumping around on stage, and it's really unique. And it kind of, I mean, the audience, I mean, people were really into the music, and you could see that in their faces. I mean, because I tour managed some bands, and I'm not really looking at the band. I'm looking at the front rows and seeing if if they like the music, and these guys are really liking the music, and it's great that if anybody wants to know about the bands, they should start at the movie Dance Craze, because it's such a great document of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost 90 minutes of non-stop footage of one two-tone band after another, as if it's all one gig. And it's as you say, the energy of the audience and the energy of the bands on stage really just jumps out of the screen. It's quite incredible, really. It's like Woody Allen's Broadway Danny Rose. You can almost imagine them stepping out. It feels that visceral. And of course, from a US point of view, you get the great comparison between The Beat being filmed in New Jersey and what was happening in mid 1980 for an American audience compared to all the other footage, which is across 1980 in England. And you know, and the beat performance is fantastic. Although you know the Beats always have that slight difference to my mind, because you know, like really since the Beatles, the two-tone bands are the first lot of bands with two lead singers, and all of them are free with just microphones, except the beat. Dave Wakeland has a guitar, and so he's restricted in his movement compared to the other bands. But I think that those dynamics are really important, and it really comes across in Dance Craze, where you see Terry Hall next to Neville Staples, Suggs of Madness next to Chaz, you know, Pauline Black next to Gaps, and it gives a focal point of the two people playing off each other, both physically and musically. And you know, but I say that, you know, there's no member of any two-tone band that is motionless. You don't get Bill Wyman you know, just standing there. They're all just going crazy, aren't they? And it all comes across on celluloid.
Yeah, I mean, well, I saw the English Beat in '82. They opened the tour for the Clash, so they got, when they came over here to America, they got to play to a pretty big audience, you know, a few thousand. I mean, some of those other bands were playing in '80, '81 when they came over here, were playing to smaller audiences. But the English Beat, I think, because there's association with the Clash, got to play to the bigger audiences back then.
Yeah, I mean, I co-authored Rankin Rogers' memoir, and he was really proud of that fact, but he could never reconcile why the audiences were getting bigger and bigger as the Beat went towards their third album, and yet the chart positions didn't reflect it. You know, they were low on the Billboard, weren't they? So but yeah, I mean, there's some great outtakes and footage of the Beat playing, you know, like the first and second US festival that Steve Jobs started off, and you know, and they're just hammering it, aren't they? They're just this relentless energy of Rankin Roger, and then behind him the two that were forming the Fine Young Cannibals, Dave and Andy, doing all their wobbly Wilco Johnson leg stuff. It's really great stuff. There was always a not comedy as much, but a kind of a very carefree attitude on stage by the bands, and it really comes through. It adds to the joyousness musically, and yet lyrically there's a hard social political comment going on, but to marry the two really brings audiences, I think, and plays an integral part, and coupled, you know, with the image of it all. You know, Two Tones working on three levels is great music, great clothing, and a social political message. And you might even arrive at it in that order, but they all play an equal part. And then that final third of the lyricism gives it a real depth. Then it did, because it helped you understand the country and the nation at large. And retrospectively, just I think it broadens how we think of two-tone.
Well, let me just mention, yeah, you did the book. Some of your previous books were, you did a book with Rankin Roger, a book about the English Beat. You did an Oasis book. You've done other books about, I think you have one about the Red Wedge, or about, is that right?
Yeah, the Roots of Rock Against Racism that ended up in Red Wedge in the UK. That was my second book. I mean, that's a thing that wasn't so big in the States, although it did have members of Rock Against Racism here did come over to New York, and it slowly seeped out as an idea. But here, I mean, it was in the mid 70s, Rock Against Racism was a cultural force that was absolutely necessary, because you had neo-Nazis walking the streets of Britain, and the possibility of them getting into Parliament. And of course, that cultural movement of Rock Against Racism is what gave the impetus to a lot of the two-tone bands who went to those gigs, saw how reggae punk could work, and yet they took it that one step further, which was bringing two reggae punk bands into one band and saying it can be a unified single force. And that was the next, again, I guess, logical step of where tribal culture was going in late 70s Britain.
Yeah, I mean, from this book, I mean, you talk about going back to Coventry. I didn't realize it was it was an auto area, you know, like auto, like Detroit, much like Detroit.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't realize that, but yeah, I knew it was kind of like off, you know, it's not London and it's not Manchester, you know, but I didn't realize it was kind of you know, industrial kind of automotive, and then they kind of had like a kind of depression there, like you know, maybe in the late 70s, and you know, kind of
Yeah.
like a lot, much like Detroit. I mean, a lot of the auto factories moved to Mexico or to Asia or something, and it wasn't like, you know, like everybody's dad, you know, got like
No,
laid off or something.
no, and it works really well as the opening page of the book, the comparisons between Coventry and Detroit, and as you say, the automobile industry. But also, Jerry had this idea that two-tone could be like what Motown was. That when you heard a Motown record, from the first crack of the snare or whatever instrument, you knew it was a Motown record, and that's what he dreamed two-tone could be, that from the first bar you go, that is a two-tone record. And I think that rings true across the first kind of 6, 8, 10 maybe releases of two-tone. And so you got a production line instead of cars, a production line of records. And I thought that was all kind of rich kind of narrative to open out the book, you know.
But the specials, I mean, in the early days, I mean, when you listen to those demos, I mean, they kind of start out as a reggae band. I mean, the music was very slow. I mean, when you listen to those same songs, I mean, they're very slow. I mean, they kind of took the show, you know, and kind of road tested it and go, okay, well, we got to, at some point they go, well, we got to speed up the tempo here, you know, because like this is, you know, it's not really working. I mean, what did you think about that?
I mean, Jerry says that he heard a record by a Midlands band called Capital Letters, a song called Smoking My Ganja. And he said hearing that was the eureka moment, because there was an offbeat ska element to it, and he thought that's how you fuse it. You don't switch, as you're saying, the nascent Specials Coventry Automatics did, where it be, here's the reggae section, here's the rock section, and we go like this very rigidly. They suddenly realized that the beat could be continuous, and then Roddy, as the guitar player, realized he didn't have to rewrite his parts. He could play Johnny Thunder's kind of Eddie Cochran kind of part over an offbeat, and it would still work. And Brad on the drums could switch either way. And I think that was all critical, is finding the fusion. And you know, the greater challenge, I think, was persuading the born Jamaicans in the band, Neville and Linval, to embrace an old man's music, as they called it. This was music from the early mid 1960s Jamaica that their parents would listen to. And of course, the white kids in England were going, these records are brilliant. And they're going, no, they're old fashioned. But they, you know, but to think of two-tone as just an updated version of ska is disingenuous if you don't include the ideas of all the music in between. So you have to say what rock did in the late 60s, early 70s, what disco was doing, which you feel in the bass playing of the Selector and the bass playing of the Specials. And then most importantly, punk. You know, and if you think of how Terry Hall is, he's certainly not a Jamaican singer. He's got an attitude of a punk, and Roddy plays in a punk style. And you hear it in the way that the Body Snatchers approached, and you hear it oddly in the beat that that Roger was coming from a massive punk influence. He was the first black punk in Birmingham, which is my hometown, Birmingham in England, and yet the white kids in the beats were the ones that were into reggae, you know. So it's all mixed up and mashed up, but it worked.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, for people that don't know, the Automatics was just kind of an early name for the band, the Specials, and
yeah.
And yeah, you were right. Yeah,
Specials, alternatively known as Special, aka Coventry Automatics.
Yeah, there was a couple names there for some of these bands, and we're going. Yeah, okay, we're going. Okay, and like you said, Terry Hall kind of was in a punk band called Squad. Roddy was more of a rock and roll, so he wasn't really doing like and there was some funk elements of their music too. And you know, what do you think about John Bradbury? Was he a good drummer, or was he just more metronomic type of drummer? Like I've had arguments about like about
I
whether
think well, I think he's a great drummer. I mean, metronomic, yes, on Ghost Town. I mean, that was the remit to keep it absolutely straight, take out the rolls, less cymbals, and just keep it like that. But you know, he was, you know, his snare rolls on the early records and his kind of ability to switch from an onbeat to an offbeat seamlessly is an incredible skill. I mean, Brad was coming from a soul background and then got and found the way to incorporate reggae. I think he was a great drummer. And when the Specials reformed, the Fun Boy Specials, as I call them, you know, and Brad died and they brought in other drummers, you realised how difficult it was for the replacements to do what Brad had done, and indeed what Pete, what's Pete's surname in the Attractions could do. He could equally do that switch.
Yeah, he was, Pete. Yeah. Well, I just say that because, like, you know, Brad was like so stiff as a drummer. I mean, I think of the great drummers of the past. I mean, Keith Moon was very volatile, and then you got Ginger Baker, who had the jazz chops and stuff. So you got this guy that's like that with the stiff back, and he's just like pounding away.
Physically stiff, yeah. Yeah, but you know, it's what works, isn't it, for each band? You know, we learned that from Ringo. You know, you provide the backbeat that the song requires, and Brad provided what the Specials needed, and that's as great as a drummer needs to be.
So the Specials were kind of developed. They had a couple songs. They were kind of I mean, there was the Gangsters, kind of like when there was like an older song, Al Capone, and then they get to London, they go to the Hope and Anchor, and there's the Madness. There's like there's almost a mirror image. It's like at this,
yeah.
And they got a Prince Buster song too, and
yeah.
Well, I guess that was like kind of a weird moment.
I mean, it's an incredible part of the story, this, because Jerry Dammers had got this deal with Chrysalis where he could bring. Chrysalis had to record up to 10 bands a year for Two Tone, and when that deal was struck, Jerry didn't know who the bands were going to be. You know, Chrysalis went with it anyway, and yet suddenly here's Madness, and 100 miles away down in London, which, you know, to you lot in the States, it's just down the road, but to us lot, that's a mega journey. And so down in London, here's Madness. Across from Coventry is Birmingham, and there's the beat. You know, and then suddenly the Body Snatchers form in the image of the Specials, and the Selector form in the image of the Specials. And, you know, it's amazing that all these people, in one respect, were doing the same thing, dressing in the same way, finding the same influences from the same records, all at the same time. And yet on the other side of that, if you delve back into the history and you consider that historically how the British government post-war had invited people from the empire, British citizens from the empire, to come to the motherland to work. And then when they did, they set up families. And then these first generation kids schooled and went to youth clubs with the white kids. It was natural that they were going to come together with music as well. And that's why you get why you have the Clash doing what they did, you know, where the embrace of another culture, and the Two Tone bands just took it one step further. But it was always going to happen, I think.
Yeah, the Clash, Police and Thieves, I guess, was a big moment too. Like when I was,
of course,
that was a catalyst there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and Paul Simonon, you know, is embracing on the streets South London the music of a different culture, the clothes of a different culture, and he's bringing that and feeding that into his bandmates. And you see it, you know, that punk reggae crossover in the latter part of the 70s, and the Police did it so well, and then the Ruts would do it, and there's so many bands, you know, that it kind of took away the idea that reggae only belonged to people from the Caribbean. You know, that suddenly there were English kids doing it in Steel Pulse, in Matumbi, in Aswad. You know, these, you know, any reggae was suddenly was there for anybody, I would say. And it took a while for some artists to recognize that, but you know, then they did, like Linton Kwesi Johnson, and suddenly they were on board and wanted to be part of it.
Do you think Jerry Dammer still retains a lot of the rights to the masters? I mean, you get these like kind of collect greatest hits collections that come out all the time, and you know, Chrysalis just pumps these things out. Do you think like Dammer's like is okay with that, or you know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Chrysalis owned pretty much everything, but Jerry has a very one-to-one close relationship with the person who's behind the reissues currently at Chrysalis. So nothing that happens, I don't know how far that goes back, maybe 10 years, I don't know precisely, but nothing comes out now without Jerry sanctioning it.
Okay. The well, like Jerry, I mean, he had the great idea for Two Tone, but he wasn't really a business guy. You know, he wasn't really like. I mean, they didn't really have like the, you know, they didn't have like the EMI offices or you know, or you know, even like Alan McGee kind of Creation Records kind of
Yeah.
thing. You know, it was just him and like a publicist, I think, or something. You know what?
Well, kind of. I mean, there's three levels to the way Two Tone works. There's the Coventry end, which is just Jerry's bedsit, and you know, as we've all seen from the film, just mountains of cassettes, contracts being chucked away. You know, the two-tone suits falling down whenever you try and pull one off the rail. You know, that kind of mayhem, and to a certain degree, you know, Jerry downplaying his intelligence. He's a grammar school educated man, and he's a lot more intelligent than he wanted to perhaps put across at this point. Then down in London, you had a management team of Rick Rogers and Juliette DeVee, and they were booking and running Two Tone from a central point of view. And then you had all the press and marketing weight of Chrysalis. So, but really, in across the story of Two Tone Records, 79 to 86, everything's is reliant upon Jerry's kind of say so, but he does have those avenues to fall back on. How much he does is I think troubles him really, because he's trying to maintain independence and a sense of this isn't going to be how normal record companies operate.
But I just said that because like it seemed like when Madness went over to Stiff Records, those guys like kind of had like a couple years. They had like the whole history of punk and Elvis Costello and Ian Dury and all those other guys too. Kind of go, okay, we got this great band Madness, and now we know what to do where we fucked up with those other guys. It seemed like Madness longevity, and they I mean, Madness were the one that had all the hits in the 80s. I mean, you know, like,
well, they had all their hits in the 80s because they had the best songwriters ultimately. I think that's what and all seven of them write at different times, and they also knew how to draw on each other when times were tough rather than be against one another. You know, so there's many reasons why Madness survived, in the same way as they had great writers in UB40, not least their dad, writing the first lot of lyrics. And it's no wonder they've continued. And again, in the beat survived for 3 albums worth of material, again, because they could draw on one another and share songwriting. There were greater struggles, I think, within Selector and Specials. It's just a big boxing match, isn't it? Almost.
Yeah, well, let's go back to the special. Okay, so the second album, when I remember when more specials came out, I thought besides like Rat Race, I didn't think it just sounded weird to me. Now I like the record, you know, but
Yeah.
when I heard the single Rat Race, I go, yeah, this sounds like it could have been on the first record. But I listen to the rest of the songs, I go, what is this? I mean, it's like easy listening. It's like, I mean, like that Martin Denny stuff. I didn't really know about that stuff till like maybe 5 years later or something. But
What stuff? Martin Denny, did you say?
yeah, no, Martin Denny, the Exotica guy.
Okay.
I mean, some of the weird songs, the the Muzak and
Yeah, I mean, I mean, in North America, you had Rat Race on the album. We didn't even have that.
oh,
So, I mean, the edition I bought had Rat Race on it.
well, no, the American label was saying, yeah, gotta have Rat Race on that record because
Yeah, and it makes sense. It is on there, really. And on the cassette version here, no, you didn't get Rat Race. You got Bragging and Try Not to Lie and Rude Boys Out of Jail. But I think it's only really side 2 of More Specials that's the more challenging. And then it's only really Stereotype and International Jet Set. I mean, what's even more incredible is More Specials was recorded 6 months after the first Specials album. That's an incredible leap. I mean, I'm not even sure the Beatles moved that quickly.
But I mean, they kind of I mean, they wanted. I mean, it was basically Jerry Dammers wanted to do this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Rat Race was more of a Roddy tune.
Yeah, and they've been doing it since '79 as well, Rat Race live.
And you know, the band. I mean, they were already touring that record and probably looking at you know, you look at videos and you know they're not dressing in suits anymore. You know, like Neville's wearing like, you know, like Hawaiian shirts. He's playing bongos. It's like the band's like kind of evolved, and you know you could see. And then once you hear Ghost Town, it's like, okay, well, here's like the template for the Fun Boy 3 right here. You know, like this. You know,
in Ghost Town.
I think so. Yeah, I think even though Jerry Dammers wrote it, it just to me it sounds like it could have been a Fun Boy 3 song.
Wow, blimey. Well, I don't know.
That's my opinion.
I mean, I think the Fun Boy 3's second album, Waiting, is one of the great albums. You know, I love it, but I hadn't considered it from that point of view. I mean, that's the great shame, isn't it? I mean, the Specials then lose their front 3 people, the front 2 singers, and plus Linval, and they don't recover because the Special AKA album hasn't got a strong lead singer. You know, it hasn't got Terry Hall basically.
Well, they'd been together for a couple of years by then. So do you think like maybe it was like Jerry Dammers, because he had the publishing, was getting more of the money, and those guys just, you know, were just getting paid like wages or something, and they just wanted.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the argument that Roddy says in the book, isn't it? That they suddenly see the royalty checks, and there's a disparity, but there would be, because it depends on how many songs you write and who has the A side of the single or the B side. You know, and Roddy was up there, and Jerry would be higher, and then it would be incrementally going down the line. But Jerry, I think, drove through a narrative of we can all earn money, and a lot of that was behind the ideas of why he was against waste, and record companies disguising where money was being spent, so on a posh hotel or on a nice limousine, you know. And Jerry had his head in, you know, the way that Rod Stewart had betrayed them by becoming all transatlantic and, you know, all about wealth. And he was coming from a punk idea, sensibility of, no, you know, don't be drawn by these things that will detract from what we're trying to do. And if you don't do that, you can have more wealth and then buy a car at home or a house or whatever you're after most. But, you know, that part of that argument falls into a class thing, which is so fundamental in understanding why the Specials and other bands in two-tone clash. There is definitely a middle class, working class clash going on.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, well, did Jerry Dammers share his publishing, like say, like, you know, like Pulp, is the band Pulp with Jarvis Cocker? They seem like they had like all 5 members got like 20%.
Yeah, no, Jerry didn't share it, and he has absolutely no reason why he should, really. But, you know, Madness did. Madness came out, and the Beat shared everything. The Select didn't share it, all went to Neil Davis. But Madness had the best deal, I think, that every band in the world should adopt, which is 50-50, 50% to the writers, 50% to the rest of the band.
I think those bands tend to last longer, you know, and then because after a couple of years, when the checks start coming in, this guy's got like a nice house and a nice car, and some of these guys, like they're still living with their parents or whatever.
Yeah, but you know, Jerry had the whole concept and delivered the whole concept of two-tone, and had the idea of the specials and delivered the specials. And I don't think it's for any single person to make a judgment on what Jerry Dammers decided to do with his share of the money that he had rightfully earned. That's down to him. And some bands, Noel Gallagher did exactly the same with Oasis. He kept it, you know, Queen nearly split, so they decided to share it all. The Who nearly split early on, so they decided to share out the songwriting. Every band's done it differently. And it's, you know, ultimately each musician has to decide what their motivation for being in a band is, I think.
Okay, well, let me just say that everyone should get this book, Too Much Too Young by Daniel Rachel. Buy 5 copies. He'll be in the States like starting in August.
Yeah.
Book Soup, Makeout Room, and in New York, he's going to be at Rough Trade. So, you know, check it out, August and September. And if people want to contact you, they go to danielrachel.com. That's the best place to find the information about you.
Yeah, there's everything there. There's even if you want to write to me, there's an email contact there somewhere. What? It's all low budget, as your Kinks album is in the corner there.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, well, I interviewed. Well, my previous interview was the band that opened up for the Kinks and stuff, and like.
Who was that?
The Hollywood Stars back in the 70s.
Ah, right.
So, what's next after? I mean, two-tone. I mean, this must have taken like 2 or 3 years to put together, maybe longer. I mean, what's next for Daniel Rachel? What's coming up next?
Well, I need some thinking space, because I've not had a book that's been, I think that's had so much attention as this one has. I mean, in the UK, it was published in October, and I'm still doing interviews for the UK for it, you know, and now there's the US publication, so it's starting again. But, you know, I can't wait to come to the US. I've only ever been to New York.
Okay, well, I'll be there. I'll be coming in with my Vespa army, and
oh, fantastic!
We'll take
over. Limval to sign your scooter.
Yeah, is he living here? Yeah.
No, he's coming to Book Soup with Sarah Jane from Bell Stars and Body Snatchers.
Okay, I gotta check that. I'll definitely be there. Okay, well, thanks for talking to me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Everyone, get this book. It's a great book. It's one of my books of the year, so it's going to be on my the end of the year list this year. Okay, thanks, Daniel.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Take care. Let's see. Wait a minute. Let's see. Do we? Let's see. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Again.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much for having me.
Cheers.